Through the silent darkness of space, a long silver-black spacecraft glided like a blade slicing through the fabric of the universe. Its streamlined hull reflected the cold glimmer of distant stars, while the low hum of the gravitic engines resonated through its core. Inside, the only sound was the rhythmic hiss of the life support systems. In the softly illuminated lounge, bathed in pale blue light, sat two figures, a man and a woman, brother and sister. Their faces were tense, focused, as if carved from stone. Elian, tall and broad-shouldered, with sharp cheekbones and short steel-gray hair, stared out of the viewport at the infinite cosmos. His cold, storm-gray eyes betrayed nothing, but beneath the surface, a storm was raging. "I never thought it would end like this," he said in a low voice without turning. "Exiled, like criminals." Sera sat opposite him, her knees drawn up to her chest. Her silvery white hair fell across her face, and her amber eyes burned like molten metal. "Criminals," she scoffed, her voice rough with suppressed anger. "We're the only ones who dare to speak the truth. We never belonged to them, Elian. We were never part of their so-called collective." Elian turned his gaze toward her, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and pain. "And what now?" he asked, spreading his hands slightly. "We're heading to some primitive planet, full of beings who know nothing about us, nothing about our technology, nothing about our past. Earth. Even a name sounds clumsy." Sera rose sharply to her feet, her figure outlined by the sleek black bodysuit with silver accents that hug her athletic frame. "Better to be exiled than live in a cage," she said firmly, her voice ringing in the cold silence. "I won't regret what we did." Elian closed his eyes, inhaling deeply. He knew there was no point in arguing. His sister had always been fire, untamed, unyielding, and untouchable. He, on the other hand, was ice. Fire and ice. Yet somehow, that balance was the only thing keeping them alive. The ship's navigation AI came to life with a calm, synthetic voice. "Entering planetary atmosphere, Earth. Estimated time to contact, 3 minutes. Prepare for extreme G-forces." Elian tightened his harness, checking the seat locks twice. Sera followed his example, but her amber eyes gleamed with anticipation rather than fear. "Have you even thought about what comes next?" he asked quietly, eyes fixed ahead. "We have no home, no status, no allies. We're strangers. We'll start over," she shot back, her tone sharp and steady. "This time, on our own terms." The moment the craft entered Earth's atmosphere, the hull began to tremble violently. Waves of heat rolled over the outer layers, plasma licking across the shields like living fire. Sera shut her eyes, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. Then, impact. The ship tore through cloud cover and slammed into the ground with a deafening roar, carving a smoking trench into the dense underbrush on the outskirts of a massive human city. A haze of steam rose from the hull. Elian unfastened his harness and stood slowly, his muscles tense. Through the fractured canopy, the city lights glimmered in the distance. Towering structures, glowing highways, rivers of neon weaving through the darkness. "Welcome to Earth," he muttered grimly. The airlock hatch slid open with a metallic hiss, releasing a gust of warm, humid air. Outside, a crowd of humans had gathered, their primitive floodlights glaring into Elian's eyes. Armed soldiers formed a perimeter, weapons raised and ready. "Don't move," someone barked in harsh, clipped English. Elian slowly raised his hands, showing he was unarmed. Sera mirrored his gesture, but kept her gaze cold, almost defiant. From behind the soldiers stepped a tall man in a dark suit, flanked by 2 guards. His stern face carried an edge of authority, and his sharp blue eyes studied them with a mix of caution and curiosity. "My name is Colonel Richard Crow," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "I represent the United Earth Council. Who are you, and why have you entered our airspace unannounced?" Sera's lips curled into the faintest smirk, but Elian stepped forward before she could speak. "We didn't invade," he said firmly, his voice deep and steady. "We were exiled from our homeworld. My name is Elian, and this is my sister, Sera. We seek no conflict." Crow regarded them for several long seconds, his jaw tight, then gave a short nod to his men. "Lower your weapons," he ordered. "They're coming with me." They were taken to an underground facility, endless white walls, mirror panels, and surveillance cameras in every corner. Elian and Sera were separated for questioning. Elian sat across from Colonel Crow and a team of scientists, the table between them glowing faintly with holographic displays of the crashed ship and biological scans of their bodies. "So," Crow leaned forward, folding his hands, "you're telling me you were exiled. For what exactly?" Elian hesitated for a brief second before answering. "For thinking," he said quietly. "On Valtarion, there is no I. There is only we. The collective controls everything. We believed individuality mattered, that freedom was strength, not weakness. For that, we became dangerous." The scientists exchanged hushed glances. Crow raised an eyebrow, leaning back in his chair. "So you're dissidents," he said slowly, almost amused. "Interesting." Meanwhile, in another room, Sera was being questioned by a different team. Her interrogation was more volatile, her voice sharp, her temper barely restrained. She refused to explain too much, meeting every question with suspicion. Hours later, They were finally released into a small, bare room containing 2 narrow beds and a single console. Elian found his sister seated cross-legged on one of the beds, her arms folded tightly across her chest. "They don't trust us," she muttered, staring at the floor. "And they shouldn't," Elian replied simply. "Not yet." She looked up, fire burning behind her amber eyes. "Then we'll make them trust us." Elian didn't argue, but deep inside, he knew the truth. Earth wasn't a sanctuary. It was an arena, and the real battle hadn't even begun. The first few days on Earth blurred into a haze of blinding lights, endless questioning, and constant surveillance. Elian and Sera were confined to a secure research facility deep beneath the surface, surrounded by pale walls and emotionless faces. Humans in white coats hovered around them like curious insects, probing, scanning, measuring. Sera hated it. She paced restlessly in their small room, fingers tapping against her thigh, her amber eyes burning with defiance. "They treat us like specimens," she hissed, stopping suddenly. "Not guests. Not even prisoners. Specimens." Elian leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his gray eyes fixed on her. "What did you expect? We fall out of the sky, dress like this, and tell them we're from another star. Of course, they're afraid." "I'm not afraid," she shot back. "No," he said, his tone flat, "but you should be. Fear makes humans unpredictable. We need to be careful." A soft chime announced the arrival of visitors. The door slid open, revealing 2 human officers in dark tactical uniforms. One was tall and broad-shouldered with short dark hair and sharp blue eyes. The other, leaner, with tousled blonde hair and an easy expression that barely masked tension. "I'm Lieutenant Jason Cole," said the taller one, his voice clipped and professional. He gestured to his partner. "This is Sergeant Ryan Hale. We've been assigned as your security detail." Sera arched a brow. "Security? You mean guards?" Ryan gave a small, cautious smile. "Call it whatever makes you comfortable. Our job is to make sure nothing happens to you, and that you don't accidentally start World War III. Elian straightened, studying the men carefully. He didn't trust them, but he respected honesty when he heard it. Days turned into weeks, and the initial tension between the aliens and their human hosts began to shift. Elian spent hours studying human history through the facility's terminals, absorbing everything from philosophy to warfare. Sera, meanwhile, wandered wherever the guards allowed, testing boundaries constantly. She found herself drawn to Ryan, his curiosity, his quiet humor, his patience with her endless questions. He explained things others wouldn't. The city above, the way humans communicated without words, the strange rituals of Earth's cultures. One evening, as they stood by a window overlooking the underground cityscape of glowing corridors, she asked, "Do you ever wonder what's out there, beyond your little planet?" Ryan hesitated before answering. "Every day." His gaze flicked toward her. "But looking at you, I think I'm finally starting to understand how small we really are." Sera's lips curved slightly, though she said nothing. Across the facility, Elian trained with Jason in one of the simulation chambers. Jason wanted to test their combat abilities, and Elian obliged without hesitation. The humans quickly learned he was faster, stronger, more precise than they could have imagined. But Elian also learned something unexpected. Jason was a soldier who valued discipline, loyalty, and strategy. In another life, on another world, they might have been allies. Late one night, alarms blared through the facility. Elian and Sera shot upright in their beds as red lights bathed the walls. The door hissed open, and Jason stormed in. "Stay with me," he barked. "This isn't a drill." Sera grabbed her boots, pulling them on as she demanded. "What's happening?" Jason's jaw was tight. "We don't know yet. Power fluctuations. Possible breach." Elian's stomach clenched. He'd seen sabotage before, and this felt too familiar. As they moved quickly through the hallways, Ryan joined them, his face pale but determined. He fell in a step beside Sera, handing her a compact human-made weapon. "Just in case," he muttered. She glanced at it, then at him, one brow raised. "You're arming me?" "I'm trusting you," he corrected softly. Somewhere deep in the facility, a low rumble shook the floor beneath their feet. Elian slowed for a fraction of a second, his instincts screaming. This wasn't a human attack. Someone, or something, from Valtarion had found them, and it was only the beginning. The tension in the facility thickened over the following days. Whatever had triggered the alarms wasn't discussed openly, but Elian noticed the subtle changes. More guards, more encrypted channels, more whispered conversations between officers who thought he wasn't listening. Sera noticed it too, though she cared less about military movements and more about the shifting energy in the air, an instinctual awareness that something was closing in on them. "They know more than they're telling us," she murmured one night as she sat cross-legged on her bed, absently twisting a strand of silvery hair between her fingers. Elian leaned against the wall, arms folded, silent for a long moment before replying. "They're scared, and they should be." She frowned, amber eyes sharp. "You think this is about us?" He nodded slightly. "I think someone followed us here." The next day, they were summoned to a strategy briefing led by Colonel Crow himself. The air in the room felt heavy as holographic projections lit up, displaying patterns of unusual energy readings orbiting Earth. "These signatures appeared 72 hours ago," Crow began, his voice steady but strained. "Our satellites picked up multiple unidentified objects holding a high altitude. They're cloaked, but but not perfectly. We believe they're observing us, observing you. Sera crossed her arms, her tone sharp. Then you should assume they're from Valtarion. Ryan, standing at her side, glanced at her quickly but said nothing. Crow's eyes narrowed. If that's true, what do they want? Elian stepped forward, his voice low and deliberate. Control. They don't tolerate dissent. To them, we're an infection, and if they believe we're contaminating this planet, they won't hesitate to remove the threat. Silence fell over the room. Jason finally broke it. So what's our play? Crow's jaw tightened. We prepare for the possibility of hostile contact. But for now, we keep this contained. Public panic helps no one. Life in the facility became even more restricted. Sera was frustrated, pacing the halls like a caged predator. Ryan shadowed her whenever she was allowed outside their quarters, his quiet presence grounding her in a way she didn't want to admit. Late one evening, she found him sitting alone in one of the observation domes, staring up at the simulated starfield projected on the curved glass ceiling. You don't sleep much, she said, stepping inside. Ryan gave a small, tired smile. Hard to sleep when the universe feels like it's shrinking around you. She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders brushed, but said nothing. For a while, they watched the illusion of distant galaxies spinning above them. Then Ryan spoke softly. I know you don't trust us, and I can't blame you. But if this turns into a fight, I want you to know something. Sera turned to face him, her amber eyes catching the soft glow of the lights. What? I'm on your side, he said simply. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Sera didn't reply with sarcasm or suspicion. Instead, she just held his gaze and quietly nodded. Meanwhile, Elian trained with Jason in the lower levels of the facility, running combat simulations designed to test their synergy. At first, they clashed, Jason frustrated by Elian's cold precision, Elian dismissive of Jason's reliance on human tactics. But over time, something shifted. You fight like you're anticipating threats I don't even see, Jason admitted one afternoon, breathing hard after a particularly brutal sparring session. Elian wiped sweat from his brow, his voice even. Because I am. Jason narrowed his eyes. So you know they're coming. Elian met his gaze. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Before Jason could respond, the lights in the chamber flickered. An alarm sounded, soft, almost muted but urgent. Elian froze, every instinct on edge. Jason's calm bust. He answered, listening silently, then looked up at Elian, his expression grim. They've breached orbit, Jason said quietly. Elian's jaw tightened. Then it begins. The Valtarion recon ships had arrived. But what neither Elian nor Sera knew was that the enemy had already been preparing for weeks, embedding hidden operatives on Earth, infiltrating human networks, and watching their every move. The game had started long before they realized it, and someone inside the facility was already working against them. The facility's silence was deceptive. Beneath the sterile white walls and endless corridors, something unseen was tightening its grip. Every day brought more restrictions, more armed patrols, more locked doors. Elian noticed first. He always did. Small irregularities, shifts in guard rotations, encrypted transmissions late at night, power fluctuations isolated to their sector. Valtarion tactics. Sera, restless as ever, bristled under the increasing control. They're hiding something, she muttered, pacing their quarters. They're preparing, Elian corrected, watching her carefully. And not for us. They know what's coming. She stopped, fixing him with a sharp amber gaze. And you're certain it's them? He nodded slowly. I can feel them. The council won't leave us alive, Sera. Not after what we did. 2 nights later, the proof arrived. Elian woke to the faintest vibration in the floor, so subtle most wouldn't notice. But he knew this rhythm, the precise gravimetric resonance of Valtarion stealth craft entering low orbit. Before he could react, the facility's internal comms flared. Code Crimson. Level 7 lockdown. All security teams mobilize. Jason and Ryan burst into their quarters seconds later, weapons ready. They've breached our outer perimeter, Jason said grimly. Crow wants you both in command now. As they raced through the halls, Elian glanced at Ryan. Human defenses won't hold. You're underestimating what's coming. Ryan shot him a quick, sharp look. Then you'd better start telling us what we're up against. Command was chaos. Colonels shouted orders over holographic projections. Satellite feeds showed 4 faint distortions moving high above Earth's atmosphere, invisible to radar, but glowing faintly under specialized scans. Crow stood at the center, barking instructions. When Elian and Sera entered, his expression hardened. They're here for you, aren't they? Crow's voice was low but sharp. Elian didn't hesitate. Yes, and they won't stop. Sera stepped forward, chin lifted defiantly. Then let us fight. The room went silent. Jason exchanged a quick glance with Crow. You're not leaving this facility, Crow said firmly. If they want you, they'll have to go through us. Elian's jaw tightened. They will go through you, he said flatly. You've never faced them. You don't understand what they are. Later that night, Sera sat with Ryan in the observation dome, the stars above shifting as defense satellites aligned. You're scared, she said softly, not as an accusation but a statement of fact. Ryan didn't deny it. I'd be stupid not to be. He turned to her, his voice quiet. But you? You don't look afraid. Sera's amber eyes reflected the artificial starlight. I learned a long time ago that fear doesn't save you. Action does. Ryan studied her for a moment, then shook his head with a small, incredulous smile. You sound like someone who's been fighting her whole life. She didn't respond because she had. Meanwhile, deep in the lower sectors, Elian confronted Jason in the training hall. You've been holding back, Jason said after their sparring session, his voice edged with frustration. You know something we don't? Tell me. Elian hesitated, then finally spoke. The council won't send negotiators. They'll send purifiers. Elite units bred for one purpose, eradication. If they've arrived, it's already too late for diplomacy. Jason's brows furrowed. Then we prepare for war. Elian shook his head. You're preparing for the wrong kind of war. You're thinking soldiers and rifles. I'm thinking infiltration. Jason's expression sharpened. You think they're already here? I know they are, Elian replied. The first sign came hours later. A blackout. Just 10 seconds. Lights, sensors, doors. But in those 10 seconds, 2 guards vanished without trace. Sera and Ryan discovered one of them moments after power returned. Slumped against a wall, alive but unresponsive, his pupils dilated, veins darkening under his skin. Ryan crouched, checking his vitals. What the hell? Elian arrived seconds later, his voice like steel. Neural override. They've infiltrated the system. Crow ordered a full lockdown, but Elian knew better. Lockdowns didn't matter. The purifiers weren't here to negotiate. At 3:17, the attack began. The facility's perimeter defenses lit up with automatic fire as shadows moved at impossible speed across the outer fields. Energy discharges cut through reinforced plating like paper. Human soldiers fell before they even understood what they were fighting. Jason and Ryan led the counterteams, coordinating with Elian as chaos erupted around them. Sera fought beside Ryan, adapting quickly to the crude human weapons. Her movements were precise, fluid, lethal. One purifier lunged from the darkness, and she dropped it with a clean shot to the throat, the alien collapsing without a sound. Not bad, Ryan panted, reloading. Sera flashed him a sharp grin. You haven't seen anything yet. By the time the first wave ended, 34 soldiers were dead. The facility's western wing was in ruins. But they'd held. For now. Inside command, Crow slammed a fist against the console. That was reconnaissance. They were testing us. Elian stood at the center of the room, his expression carved from stone. No, that was a warning. Sera leaned against the wall, wiping blood from her cheek. Then what happens when they stop warning us? Elian turned slowly, his gray eyes colder than ice. Then, he said quietly, the real war begins. The dawn above the facility came without sunlight. High in Earth's atmosphere, cloaked Valtarion warships drifted like silent predators, their obsidian hulls invisible to human radar, but glowing faintly in Elian's senses like distant thunder. He stood at the edge of the observation deck, arms folded, watching nothing, but feeling everything. They've positioned 3 carriers above the southern hemisphere, he said quietly, not turning as Jason approached behind him. Jason stopped, his boots silent on the reinforced floor. We still can't see them, he admitted, his jaw tight. But I believe you. Elian's gray eyes stayed fixed on the darkness beyond the glass. They're not here to scare us anymore. That was yesterday. Today, they're coming to finish what they started. Jason hesitated. Then we fight. Elian finally turned his gaze on him. Cold, sharp, calculating. No, you survive. That's different. Hours later, the facility's war room was packed. Holographic maps glowed over the table, tracking faint disturbances in orbit where human sensors strained to keep up. Colonel Crow stood at the head, pale but unflinching. An invasion force of unknown size is inbound, he said, voice clipped. We assume they're here for Elian and Sera, but until we know for certain, we prepare for full engagement. Sera leaned against the wall, her amber eyes flashing under the harsh lights. You'll lose, she said flatly. Your weapons, your defenses, all your clever systems, they're obsolete against Valtarion tech. Crow turned to her sharply. Then what do you suggest? Surrender? No, she said, pushing off the wall, her movements smooth and predatory. I suggest you let us lead. Jason exchanged a glance with Ryan, who was standing near the console, tense but silent. Crow's jaw worked, but before he could reply, the lights above them dimmed. Once, twice, then stabilized. Elian straightened instantly. They penetrated the outer net. At 1932, the first Valtarion carrier decloaked. It filled the skies above the region like an eclipse, its angular black silhouette blotting out the stars. Its surface shimmered faintly as thousands of hexagonal armor plates shifted and locked into attack formation. Sera stood on the upper platform with Ryan, staring up at the holographic projection. That's a command dreadnought, she whispered. They didn't send recon units this time. They sent judgment. Ryan glanced at her sidelong. I hate the way you say that so calmly. She didn't answer. The attack began with sound. A low-frequency pulse rolled across the ground, vibrating deep in bone and muscle. Humans clutched their ears, staggering under the invisible weight, while Elian and Sera stood unaffected, their alien physiology built for resonance. Then came the light. Dozens of energy projectiles fell from the dreadnought's underside, cutting through the night like burning comets. Impact after impact erupted along the perimeter, tearing through human defenses in waves of fire and twisted metal. West barricade down. A voice screamed over comms. We're losing sectors 3 and 4. Jason's voice cut through the chaos. Seal off the lower passages. Contain them where we can. Elian was already moving, his steps silent, his presence sharp as a blade. Jason, with me. Ryan, keep Sera alive. Sera shot him a glare. I don't need protecting. Ryan smirked faintly, sliding a fresh magazine into his rifle. Good. Saves me the trouble. By the time they reached the west wing, the corridor was filled with smoke and shadows. Valtarion purifiers moved like liquid metal, their armor shifting seamlessly to deflect human bullets. Their weapons were elegant, slender plasma lances designed to pierce reinforced alloys. Jason raised his rifle, fired twice. The round sparked harmlessly off a purifier's shifting plates. They're adapting, Elian said calmly, stepping forward. Aim for the joints. Jason cursed under his breath, but adjusted, his next shot striking true. The purifier dropped soundlessly, its armor liquefying into a pool of black nanite residue. For a moment, there was quiet. Then an explosion ripped through the ceiling, showering them with debris. Elian shoved Jason clear, the shockwave hurling them into opposite walls. Through the smoke, more purifiers surged forward, 10, 20, maybe more. Elian activated the embedded nodes along his forearms, bioluminescent veins flaring faint blue as Valtarion combat enhancements woke beneath his skin. Jason froze, startled, as Elian moved with unnatural speed, intercepting the nearest attacker and slamming it into the wall hard enough to dent alloy plating. You've been holding back, Jason muttered, wiping blood from his cheek. Elian didn't look at him. You haven't seen me fight yet. Meanwhile, Sera and Ryan were holding the eastern line. The sounds of battle thundered around them. Plasma fire, screams, collapsing steel. You take the left, I'll cover the flank, Ryan barked, firing in short, precise bursts. Sera nodded once, her body flowing through motion like liquid. She vaulted over a fallen barrier, twin energy blades extending from the bracers on her forearms, slicing cleanly through a purifier's armor at the neck. Its body collapsed instantly, lifeless. Ryan blinked. That's new. Adapt, she snapped, already moving. For a brief moment, their movements synced perfectly. Ryan's disciplined bursts of fire complementing Sera's lethal precision. The human and the alien fighting as one. And yet, deep beneath the chaos, Sera felt it. A cold, gnawing certainty that this was only the opening strike. At command, Crow's team struggled to keep up. Dreadnought deploying ground pods, an analyst shouted. Estimated 2 minutes until they breached Sector 12. Crow slammed his palm on the table. Divert all reserves. No. Elian's voice came through comms, steady and unyielding. Evacuate them. They won't hold Sector 12. That's where they want you focused. Crow hesitated, then swore under his breath. You're in charge of that sector now. Elian didn't reply. He was already moving. Then, everything changed. In the depths of the facility, deep inside Sublevel 6, a new alarm triggered, one no one had heard before. Doors locked automatically, sealing entire wings. Power rerouted to unknown sectors. Jason, catching his breath beside Elian, checked his comms. What the hell was that? Elian's expression darkened. Not an external breach. That's inside. Sera's voice came sharp and urgent over the channel. Elian, one of your people is already here. They've been inside this whole time. Jason looked at him, stunned. You're telling me there's a mole in the facility? Elian's jaw clenched. Not a mole. His voice dropped, sharp as broken glass. A purifier, wearing a human skin. The comm went dead. Above them, the dreadnought began to descend. Its shadow swallowed the horizon, its energy core pulsing like a black sun. The war was no longer coming. It was here, and for the first time since they'd arrived on Earth, Elian wasn't sure they would survive. The facility's ruins still smoked from the previous night's battle, the scent of scorched metal and ozone hanging heavy in the air. Emergency crews swarmed the wreckage, dragging injured soldiers out from collapsed sections, while engineers struggled to bring basic systems back online. But beneath the frantic surface, an even greater danger was unfolding. Elian stood on the command balcony overlooking the central atrium, his gray eyes fixed on the glowing tactical display. A dozen red markers pulsed slowly on the map, signals of infiltrators moving inside the facility. They bypassed every firewall we had. Jason muttered beside him, running a hand over his jaw. They were in our systems for weeks, weren't they? Elian nodded once. Longer. The council planned this months before we arrived. The purifiers weren't just sent to invade. They've been watching us since the beginning. Jason swore under his breath. And we didn't see it. Elian's jaw tightened, his gaze cold. They wanted you blind. It worked. Sera paced in the room below, anger rolling off her in waves. Ryan leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, watching her silently until she finally exploded. You knew, didn't you? She hissed, spinning on her brother as he entered. You felt them coming days ago, Elian. You knew what the purifiers were capable of. And you didn't tell me. Elian closed the door softly behind him. You weren't ready. Not ready. Her amber eyes burned with fury. Do you think I'm a child? Do you think I haven't fought before? We could have been preparing, but instead, we were caught like prey. Ryan stepped forward carefully, placing a hand on her shoulder. Sera, we don't have time for this right now. She shook him off violently. Don't take his side. You don't understand what it means when they send purifiers. You don't understand what they'll do to us if they win. Elian stepped closer, his voice calm but edged with steel. I understand perfectly. That's why I kept it quiet. I needed them to underestimate us. Sera laughed bitterly. Underestimate you, you mean? Their eyes locked, tension sharp enough to cut the air between them. An alarm blared across the facility, cutting the argument short. Unauthorized access detected. Sublevel 6. Containment breach. Jason's voice cracked through the comm. We've got a problem. Well, the infiltrators isn't just hacking systems. They're inside. They've disguised themselves as one of ours. Elian froze. A faint vibration rippled along his skin. A resonance only someone like him could feel. It's not just a disguise, he said quietly. It's a full mimic. Ryan's face drained of color. You mean? Elian nodded grimly. A purifier, wearing human DNA like clothing. In sublevel 6, chaos erupted. A squad of Earth security forces cornered a technician who'd been working in the energy sector for months. Unremarkable, quiet, well-liked. But when they tried to detain him, his skin peeled away, revealing smooth, obsidian armor beneath. The purifier moved like liquid shadow, tearing through the first two soldiers before anyone could react. Plasma lanced from its arm, slicing through reinforced bulkheads like paper. Jason's team arrived seconds later, opening fire, but their weapons barely slowed it down. Keep it distracted, Jason shouted. Elian's on his way. Elian arrived without a weapon, his enhancements already surging beneath his skin, bioluminescent veins glowing faintly under the pale lights. He crossed the distance in a blur, tackling the purifier into a wall hard enough to crack alloy plating. For the first time, Jason and Ryan saw Elian fight without restraint. His movements were brutal but precise, his body a living weapon, strikes calculated, every counter anticipating the purifier's next move. But the mimic was relentless, adapting with every passing second. Its black armor shifted in real time, reshaping itself against his attacks. Elian's breathing grew ragged as he forced it down, slamming it into the floor with a sound that shook the chamber. Finally, he drove his hand into the purifier's chest, disrupting the core node. With a flash of blue light, the creature collapsed, its form liquefying into a pool of nanite residue that hissed softly before evaporating. When the silence settled, Sera approached slowly, her expression unreadable. That, she said softly, is what you've been hiding from me. Elian met her gaze, his face calm, but his voice heavy. If I told you, would it have changed anything? Yes, she whispered, stepping closer. I would have been ready, but there was no time to argue. A sudden tremor shook the floor beneath them, stronger than before. The lights flickered, and the holographic display above the atrium lit up with a live satellite feed. 3 more Valtarion dreadnoughts had decloaked. Sera stared at the display, her amber eyes wide. That's not an invasion force, she breathed. That's an extermination fleet. Ryan cursed under his breath. How the hell are we supposed to fight that? Elian stepped forward, his expression colder than steel. We don't fight them here, he said softly. We take the fight to orbit. Crow turned sharply. You're out of your mind. That's suicide. But Elian was already speaking into his comms, calling up data no human should have access to. There's an auxiliary hangar under sublevel 9, he said. My ship can be reactivated. It's the only thing fast enough to reach them before they deploy the final wave. Jason frowned. You're planning on leaving the facility? Elian nodded once. If we wait, this base will be rubble before sunrise. That night, as chaos spread and evacuation alarms blared, Elian, Sera, Jason, and Ryan prepared for the most dangerous mission yet, boarding the flagship dreadnought in orbit and disabling its command core. But what none of them knew, the leader of the Valtarion Council was already on board, waiting, watching, and he wanted his traitors alive. The night sky above Earth burned with ghostly light. 3 Valtarion dreadnoughts hung in low orbit, their jagged black silhouettes blotting out the stars. The largest, a flagship unlike any Elian had seen before, radiated power in silent waves, its obsidian armor shifting like liquid shadow. Deep below, inside the auxiliary hangar of sublevel 9, Elian's hands moved quickly over the dormant interface of his personal strike craft, the Seraphis. The sleek, needle-shaped ship had been locked and buried by the human military since their arrival, but now it pulsed faintly as its systems roared back to life. Sera stood a few meters away, arms folded, glaring at him. Her amber eyes were molten in the cold light of the consoles. You kept this hidden too, she said flatly. Elian didn't look up. If they'd known what Seraphis was capable of, the humans would have dismantled her for study. And then we'd have nothing right now. Jason approached, strapping on a combat vest, his rifle slung across his back. This thing's actually space-worthy? Elian's gray eyes flicked toward him briefly. She'll outrun anything you've ever seen. Ryan stepped up beside Sera, checking his weapon. Then I guess we're going to orbit, he muttered under his breath. Sera didn't answer. She was still watching her brother, silent tension burning between them. Minutes later, the Seraphis screamed free of the Earth's gravity well, tearing through the upper atmosphere like a silver spear. The engines howled, shattering sonic barriers, until they broke into the silent darkness of orbit. Below them, Earth glimmered in shadow and light. Above, the 3 dreadnoughts loomed like executioners. Jason gripped the edge of the co-pilot's console, knuckles white. Tell me we have a plan, he muttered. We board the flagship, Elian said, calm as stone. Jason's head snapped toward him. Board it? That's insane. You want us to waltz into the middle of their fleet? Not want, Elian corrected. Need. The other two dreadnoughts take commands from the flagship's core. Disable that, and the entire fleet loses coordination. Ryan swore softly under his breath. And what exactly are we supposed to do once we're on board? Smile and ask them to stand down. Sera's voice was quiet but sharp, cutting through the tension. We kill the command node. Elian nodded once, never taking his eyes off the drifting behemoth ahead. Exactly. As Seraphis approached, the flagship stirred. Its black armor unfolded like metallic petals, revealing inner docking ports lined with defense turrets. They've seen us, Jason said, his voice tight. Elian's fingers danced over the controls, flipping the ship into evasive maneuvers so violent that Jason swore he felt his stomach shift into his spine. Energy beams lanced past them, burning trails of light into the void. Hold on, Elian snapped, angling the Seraphis into a tight barrel roll before slicing between two smaller escort fighters. Alarms blared, hull integrity dipping into the red, and then, suddenly, silence. They stopped shooting, Ryan said, confused. They're letting us in, Sera said quietly, her expression cold and unreadable. Jason glanced between them. And that doesn't bother either of you? Elian's jaw tightened. It bothers me more than you know. The Seraphis touched down inside the flagship's hangar bay. The door sealed behind them with a deafening clang. For a moment, there was only the deep hum of the Valtarion engines vibrating through the deck beneath their boots. Then, from the shadows ahead, a column of armored figures stepped forward. 6 purifiers, each taller than Jason, their obsidian armor alive with faint blue veins of energy. And behind them, descending a staircase of shifting black metal, came Kalen Vare, the supreme arbiter of the Valtarion Council. His presence was suffocating, his tall frame draped in flowing battle robes woven with strands of crystalline armor. His skin, pale as ivory, gleamed faintly beneath the lights, and his deep silver eyes locked on Elian with cold, predatory focus. Elian Vare, he said softly, his voice smooth, calm, and deadly. My lost blood. Jason stiffened. Wait, blood. Sera froze beside Ryan, her chest rising and falling sharply, her gaze snapping to Elian. Tell me he's lying, she whispered. Elian didn't answer. Kalen's lips curved into something between a smile and a sneer. You never told them? How curious. My little brother, hiding his shame from the primitives he clings to. Jason stepped forward instinctively, rifle raised, but Elian lifted a hand, stopping him without looking away from Kalen. This ends here, Elian said quietly. Kalen's expression didn't change. No, Elian, this begins here. Come home, and Earth survives. Refuse, and I burn this planet down to ash. The silence in the hangar was absolute. Sera's voice cut through it like shattered glass. You knew, she said, her words low, trembling with fury. You knew who you were this whole time, what you are, and you let us walk into this blind. Elian's jaw tightened, but his eyes stayed locked on Kalen's. Jason glanced between them, realizing for the first time the scale of the threat they were facing. Elian, he said slowly, his voice low, urgent. If he's your brother, he's not bluffing. We need to leave. Now. No, Elian said, his voice steady but heavy with something darker than anger. I've run from him my entire life. That ends tonight. Kalen extended one hand, palm open. Last chance, little brother. Elian stepped forward slowly, every muscle coiled and ready. I don't take orders from you anymore. The temperature in the hangar seemed to drop as Kalen's expression hardened into pure cold rage. So be it. The purifiers attacked. Jason and Ryan opened fire instantly, plasma rounds cutting the darkness as energy bolts tore through the air. Sera ignited her twin energy blades, spinning through the first 2 purifiers with impossible speed, her movements fluid and lethal. Elian met Kalen head-on. Their clash sent shockwaves rippling through the hangar. 2 Valtarion warriors locked in a brutal dance of precision and power. Sparks cascaded around them as their strikes collided, the very deck plates groaning beneath their weight. But Kalen was stronger, faster. Every strike Elian blocked rattled his bones, and for the first time in years, he felt his body straining to keep pace. You've weakened, Kalen hissed, his hand locking around Elian's wrist. Earth has softened you. Elian's gray eyes blazed as his bioluminescent veins flared brighter, flooding his system with stored energy. No, he said, forcing Kalen back a step. Earth made me dangerous. A single blast tore through the chaos. Not from a purifier, not from Kalen. From behind them, Jason collapsed to one knee, clutching his side, smoke rising from the wound. Ryan spun around, eyes wide, weapon raised. Behind them, standing on a Seraphis ramp, was Colonel Crow, a Valtarion disruptor rifle in his hands. Sera froze, disbelief written across her face. Crow, his expression was calm, cold, unapologetic. You really thought, he said quietly, that the council came here without help? Jason was on the floor, blood pooling beneath his side, his breath shallow and ragged. Ryan dragged him behind a fallen support beam, firing bursts of plasma to hold the line. Sera stood frozen for a heartbeat, disbelief clawing through her chest as she stared at Colonel Crow, the man who had sworn to protect them. "You're working with them," she breathed, her voice low, shaking with restrained fury. Crow leveled the Valtarion disruptor rifle at her without hesitation. "I was never working with them," he said coldly. "I'm one of them." And then, before their eyes, his human skin rippled, peeling away like liquid light, revealing sleek, dark gray Valtarion armor beneath. His body elongated, features sharpening into something alien and predatory. His silver eyes glowed faintly as he dropped the rifle and extended his arm into a morphing plasma blade. Sera's amber eyes widened, her voice breaking. "Elian, he's a purifier." Kalen's cold smile deepened, his voice like a knife. "Did you really think you escaped us, brother? Crow has been here since before you arrived. We've been waiting for this moment." Elian's entire body went still, his fists clenched, his breath steady but slow. Every muscle screamed for action, but his gray eyes burned with something else, not rage. "Focus, Ryan," Elian barked, his voice sharp, commanding. "Get Jason out. Now." Ryan hesitated, torn, glancing at the chaos around them. "You'll die if we leave you." "Go," Elian roared, and for the first time, Ryan didn't argue. He pulled Jason up, half dragging him toward the Seraphis as Sera and Elian turned to face Kalen and the Purifier together. The hangar exploded into motion. Kalen charged first, his crystalline glaive slicing through the air with blinding speed. Elian met him head-on, their strikes colliding with a deafening crack, shockwaves shaking the deck beneath their boots. Crow, no, the Purifier, lunged for Sera, his plasma blade carving burning arcs through the air. She ducked low, her twin energy blades flashing, parrying his attacks with precision. Sparks cascaded with every clash, her movements a blur of speed and feral grace. "Stay with me, Sera," Elian shouted, barely catching Kalen's strike before it split him in two. Her breath ragged, Sera rolled beneath a slicing blow and stabbed upward, embedding one of her blades deep into Crow's armor. He roared, jerking back, molten nanite fluid spilling from the wound. But Crow wasn't slowing. If anything, he was evolving, his damaged armor reshaping into brutal, jagged edges, adapting with every second. Kalen knocked Elian back against a bulkhead with a powerful kick, sparks erupting as metal crumpled under the impact. He stepped forward slowly, his crystalline glaive humming with power. "You're fighting for them?" Kalen's voice was soft, disappointed, almost mournful. "For humans? Weak, primitive creatures who barely deserve their own planet." Elian spat blood and stood, his glowing veins pulsing brighter beneath his skin, his voice steady and cold. "I'm fighting for choice." Kalen's silver eyes narrowed. "Then you've chosen death." Their next clash was brutal, faster, louder, more desperate. Energy rippled around them with each impact, their strikes leaving deep gashes in the deck plates. Across the hangar, Sera screamed as Crow's blade grazed her shoulder, searing flesh and armor alike. She staggered, but before Crow could finish her, Ryan appeared from nowhere, firing a concentrated plasma round that tore through Crow's midsection. Crow dropped to one knee, snarling, his armor rippling violently as it struggled to heal. Sera grabbed Ryan's arm, panting hard. "Take Jason and get him to Seraphis," she barked, her amber eyes blazing. "We'll hold him off." Ryan hesitated, then nodded once, dragging the barely conscious Jason toward the ship. Kalen, realizing his brother wasn't breaking, suddenly changed tactics. With a gesture, his wrist module activated, and a deep rumble shook the entire flagship. Sera glanced up in horror as massive sections of the ceiling peeled away, revealing dozens of suspended energy spheres, each one pulsing brighter and brighter, gathering unstable power. Elian's eyes widened. "He's activating the oblivion array," he said hoarsely. Kalen's voice was calm, final. "One command, and I erased the human capital within seconds." Sera froze, caught between fury and fear. "Elian, he'll kill millions." Elian tightened his grip on his plasma lance, staring at his brother with steel in his eyes. "Not if I end this now." Elian surged forward, his enhancements flaring at full capacity for the first time. His body blurred, moving faster than sound, his strikes crashing against Kalen's defenses in a storm of light and thunder. Kalen countered with impossible precision, each movement an echo of their shared training, their shared blood, but Elian's desperation gave him speed, strength, purpose. Behind them, Sera and Crow's battle reached its peak. The wounded Purifier roared, his armor fracturing under her relentless assault. At last, she plunged both blades into his chest, piercing the core node directly. Crow let out a single strangled sound before collapsing into a pool of dissolving nanite ash. She turned instantly, just in time to see Elian and Kalen locked in one final exchange. With a roar, Elian feinted left, ducked beneath Kalen's glaive, and drove his plasma lance deep into his brother's chest, straight through the energy core. Kalen froze. For the first time, his cold, perfect composure faltered. He stared at Elian, silver eyes dimming, lips curling into a faint, almost proud smile. "You've grown," he whispered, voice breaking, before collapsing to his knees. The oblivion array flickered and shut down. The silence afterward was deafening. Elian fell to one knee, breathing hard, covered in blood and scorched armor. Sera ran to him, dropping beside him, clutching his face in trembling hands. "You're bleeding," she whispered, her voice breaking. He managed a small, tired smile. "So are you." Ryan stumbled toward them, dragging Jason, who was pale but alive. "We have to go," Ryan said, urgency lacing his voice. "This flagship's unstable." Sera helped Elian up as alarms blared around them. Together, they sprinted toward the Seraphis as explosions tore through the massive hangar. The Seraphis launched just as the flagship erupted behind them, the explosion consuming Kalen's dreadnought in a tidal wave of fire and shatter metal. The other two dreadnoughts broke formation immediately, retreating into hyperspace without their commander. They had won, but it didn't feel like victory. Hours later, the Seraphis floated in low orbit, silent except for the hum of its systems. Elian sat in the co-pilot's chair, bruised, battered, his eyes fixed on the curve of Earth below. Sera sat across from him, her shoulder bandaged, her amber eyes soft for the first time in days. "It's over," she said quietly. Elian shook his head faintly. "No," he whispered. "It's just beginning." Jason stirred weakly on the medcot behind them, groaning in pain but alive. Ryan leaned against the wall, exhausted, his eyes closed, a faint smile touching his lips. For the first time since leaving Valtarion, there was peace. Not safety, not certainty, but peace. Sera reached out and took Elian's hand, holding it tightly. He squeezed back, their unspoken bond stronger than ever. Outside, Earth spun slowly beneath them, quiet and fragile against the infinite black. And somewhere, deep in the void, far beyond their sensors, other eyes were watching. Because wars like this were never truly over.